What she saw made her blood run cold. Every single person in the square had the same date glowing above their foreheads, December 24th. The air was heavy with the scent of freshly pounded yam and the sound of women chatting as they fetched water from the village stream. Amina, sitting on a low wooden stool outside her family's mud hut, tilted her head toward the sky as if she could feel the sun's rays on her face. Born blind, Amina had long learned to navigate the world with her other senses. But what no one in her small village of Kora knew was that her blindness was more than just a physical condition. It came with an unexplainable gift. She first noticed the glowing numbers as a child. They hovered just above the foreheads of those around her, etched in fiery light. It wasn't until her grandmother, Nana Rabi, passed away on the exact date displayed on her head that Amina realized what the numbers meant. They were death dates. For years, she kept her secret hidden, terrified of the implications. Who would believe her? In a village steeped in superstition, her gift could easily be mistaken for a curse. She couldn't risk it. So, Amina became the quiet, mysterious girl who always seemed to know when to say her goodbyes. But everything changed one fateful morning when she walked to the market square, guided by her cousin Halima. The market was buzzing with life. Traders shouted about their wares, children darted between stalls, and the smell of roasted corn filled the air. As they passed familiar faces, Amina instinctively raised her head, though her eyes were unseeing. What she saw made her blood run cold. Every single person in the square had the same date glowing above their foreheads, December 24th. She froze mid-step, clutching Halima's arm. "What's wrong, Amina?" Halima asked, concern lacing her voice. Amina struggled to speak, her throat dry. "Nothing," she lied, but her heart raced. She couldn't tell Halima. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening. For years, she had seen dates come and go, some years apart, others just days away. But never had she seen a single date for an entire group of people, let alone an entire village. That night, as the crickets sang their haunting melody, Amina lay on her mat, staring into the darkness she had always known. Her mind raced with questions. What could cause such a tragedy? Was it a plague? An attack? She had no answers, but one thing was clear. She needed to act. The following morning, she sought out Buba, the village elder and herbalist. Known for his wisdom and his connection to the spiritual world, he was her best hope for understanding the phenomenon. "Maulam," Amina began, her voice trembling as she knelt before him. "I have come to you with a burden I can no longer bear alone." Buba, his gray beard flowing like a river, looked at her with kind but curious eyes. "Speak, child. What troubles your soul?" Taking a deep breath, Amina recounted her gift, or curse, and the ominous discovery at the market. She expected disbelief or even anger, but instead, Buba's face grew grave. "You say the entire village shares the same date?" he asked, leaning forward. "Yes," Amina whispered. "What could it mean?" Buba stood and paced the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "There are old stories," he began, his voice heavy with foreboding. "Stories of entire communities marked for death by malevolent forces. If what you say is true, then something dark looms over Kora." Amina's heart sank. She had hoped for reassurance, not confirmation of her fears. "What can we do?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "The source must be found," Buba said, "and it must be stopped before it is too late." But where would they begin? As Amina left the herbalist's hut, she felt the weight of her village's fate pressing down on her shoulders. The countdown to December 24th had begun. Amina barely slept that night, her thoughts consumed by Buba's warning. The idea that an entire village could be marked for death haunted her. She rose before dawn, her fingers tracing the edges of her woven mat as she listened to the early stirrings of life in Kora. The rooster crowed, goats bleated in the distance, and the rhythmic pounding of millet echoed faintly from the neighbor's compound. These familiar sounds now carried an ominous undertone, as if the village itself were aware of its doomed fate. By mid-morning, she found herself back at Buba's hut. The elder sat cross-legged on a mat, the air thick with the scent of burning herbs. Amina could feel his eyes on her, though her own gaze was fixed on the ground. "I have been thinking, Malam," she began, her voice steady but low. "If this darkness has come to Korra, perhaps it has roots in our past. Is there any history of curses or unnatural events tied to this village?" Booba sighed deeply. "Korra is an old village, Amina. Its history is steeped in both blessings and sins. But one story stands out, a tale few dare to speak of." Amina leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "Tell me." Booba hesitated, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Years ago, before you were born, there was a man named Adamu. He was a hunter, strong and respected, but his greed knew no bounds. One day, while deep in the forest, he stumbled upon a sacred shrine dedicated to the forest spirits. Instead of showing reverence, he desecrated it, taking the sacred relics and claiming them as his own. The spirits were enraged. It is said they cursed not only Adamu but the entire village, vowing to return when their wrath was at its peak." Amina's fingers tightened around the edge of her wrapper. "And what became of Adamu?" "He disappeared," Booba said. "Some say the spirits took him. Others believe he fled, knowing the doom he had brought upon us. But the relics were never found, and the curse remained a shadow over Korra." Amina's mind raced. If the curse was tied to these relics, perhaps finding them could break it. "Do you know where the shrine is?" she asked. Booba shook his head. "The forest has grown thick over the years, hiding its secrets. But there are still those who might remember. Seek out Mama Fatima. She is the oldest person in Korra, and was close to Adamu in her youth. If anyone knows where the shrine lies, it will be her." Amina thanked the elder and set out for Mama Fatima's hut, her cousin Halima once again guiding her. The old woman's home was at the edge of the village, surrounded by a garden of medicinal plants. When they arrived, Mama Fatima was seated under a mango tree, her frail hands weaving a basket. "Ah, Amina," she said, her voice quivering with age but still warm. "What brings you here, child?" Amina hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "Mama, I need to ask about Adamu and the shrine in the forest. Do you remember anything about it?" The old woman's hand stilled, and a shadow crossed her face. "Why would you ask about such a thing?" "I believe the village is in danger," Amina said, her tone urgent. "And I think it has to do with the curse tied to that shrine." Mama Fatima sighed, her eyes distant. "Adamu was a fool," she said. "I warned him not to touch the spirit's relics, but he wouldn't listen. He was always chasing wealth, believing he could outsmart even the gods. When the curse fell upon us, it was as if the land itself mourned. Crops failed, children fell ill, and the forest grew wild and unforgiving. But over time, people forgot. They thought the curse was just a story. Do you know where the shrine is?" Amina pressed. Mama Fatima nodded slowly. "I went there once long ago. It lies deep in the forest, past the old baobab tree. But beware, child, the spirits are not forgiving, and the forest is not what it once was." With this knowledge, Amina knew what she had to do. But the journey into the forest would not be easy. She needed someone to guide her, a task that would fall to Halima, who reluctantly agreed after much pleading. The next morning, armed with a walking stick and a small bag of provisions, Amina and Halima set out for the forest. The villagers watched them leave with puzzled expressions, whispering among themselves. As they entered the dense undergrowth, the air grew cooler, and the sounds of the village faded into silence. Hours passed as they followed Mama Fatima's directions, their path winding deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees grew taller and thicker, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. Amina's heightened senses picked up every rustle and chirp, each sound amplifying her unease. When they finally reached the ancient baobab tree, its massive roots twisting like the fingers of a giant, Amina felt a strange energy in the air. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Halima shivered. "Are you sure about this, Amina? What if the spirits are still angry?" "We have no choice," Amina replied. "If we don't act, everyone in Korra will die." As they pressed on, the forest seemed to come alive around them. Shadows danced in the corners of Amina's vision, and the air grew heavy with an unearthly stillness. Finally, they arrived at a clearing. In the center stood a crumbling shrine, overgrown with moss and vines. Amina stepped forward, her heart pounding. Though she couldn't see the shrine, she could feel its presence, a powerful, almost oppressive force. She knelt before it, running her hands over the cold stone. Adamu's relics must still be here, she said. Halima hesitated, then began searching the shrine. After several tense minutes, she uncovered a small wooden box hidden beneath a pile of stones. Inside were several objects: a carved figurine, a string of beads, and a small, rusted knife. "These must be them," Halima said, her voice shaking. But as soon as she touched the relics, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Amina felt the vibration through her knees, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the forest, a sound that could only be described as a growl. "The spirits," Halima whispered, clutching Amina's arm. Amina stood, her resolve hardening. "We need to return these to their rightful place. It's the only way to lift the curse." As they prepared to leave, the forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing darker and more menacing. The spirits were watching, and they were not pleased. The forest roared to life as Amina and Halima clutched the box of relics. The ground shook beneath their feet, and an icy wind tore through the clearing, howling like a pack of wolves. Halima's grip on Amina's arm tightened as she cried, "We need to leave now." "Wait," Amina said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. She could feel the energy of the relics vibrating through the box. The spirits were furious, but there was also a sense of desperation. "We can't just take these. We need to return them to the shrine in the proper way." "How do you know what to do?" Halima asked, her voice trembling. "I don't," Amina admitted. "But the spirits wouldn't want us to simply run away. We need to appease them." Amina reached into the box and lifted the string of beads. Though she couldn't see them, she could feel their warmth and hear a faint hum, as if the relics themselves were alive. She knelt in front of the shrine, placing the beads on the cold stone altar. Halima followed her lead, setting down the figurine and the knife. The wind stopped abruptly, and the forest fell into a deafening silence. For a moment, Amina thought they had succeeded, but then a voice, deep and otherworldly, echoed through the clearing. "Why have you come?" it demanded, the sound reverberating in their bones. Amina swallowed hard. "We've come to return what was taken," she said, her voice steady but low. "The relics belong to the spirits. We're here to right the wrong that was done." The voice growled in response. "You think mere mortals can undo the pain of betrayal? The curse has already taken root. The lives of your people are forfeit." "No," Amina cried, rising to her feet. "It wasn't us who betrayed you. It was Adamu. The village shouldn't suffer for his greed. Please, spare them." The shadows around the shrine shifted, and Amina could feel the presence of something vast and ancient. "The curse cannot be lifted without sacrifice," the voice said. "Will you offer yourself in exchange for your people?" Halima gasped, clutching Amina's hand. "You can't," she whispered. Amina's heart raced. She had always feared her gift, seeing it as a curse that set her apart. But now, she realized it was her purpose. If she could save the village, her life would have meaning. "I'll do it," she said firmly. The voice seemed to laugh, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Very well," it said, "but know this. The sacrifice is not yours alone to give. The people of Korra must acknowledge their role in allowing greed to fester. They must confront the darkness within themselves and offer their own atonement." "What does that mean?" Halima asked, her voice shaking. "You must return to the village," the voice said. "If the people do not take responsibility for their actions, the curse will claim them all." The air grew still once more, and Amina knew their time in the forest had ended. Clutching the empty box, she and Halima retraced their steps back to the village, their path eerily quiet. When they reached Korra, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the rooftops. The villagers gathered around them, their faces a mixture of curiosity and fear. Amina stepped forward, her unseeing eyes fixed on the crowd. "The spirits have spoken," she announced. "The curse can only be lifted if we confront the greed and selfishness that brought it upon us." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One man stepped forward, his face pale. What do you mean, Amina? Adam's actions may have triggered the curse, Amina said, but we allowed it to fester by ignoring the signs, by turning a blind eye to corruption and injustice. The spirits demand that we take responsibility, not just with words, but with deeds. Booba nodded, stepping to her side. She's right, he said. For years, we've lived in denial, pretending the curse was just a story. But we all knew something was wrong. It's time to make amends. The villagers fell silent, their gazes dropping to the ground. One by one, they began to speak, confessing their own small acts of greed and selfishness. A farmer admitted to hoarding food during a famine. A trader confessed to cheating her customers. The village chief, his voice heavy with shame, revealed that he had known about the curse but had done nothing to address it. As the confessions poured out, Amina felt a change in the air. The oppressive weight that had hung over the village began to lift. The spirits were listening. Under Booba's guidance, the villagers organized a ceremony of atonement. They offered gifts of food and handcrafted items at the village square, dedicating them to the spirits. Amina, though blind, could sense the sincerity of their actions. As the final offering was placed on the altar, a sudden gust of wind swept through the square, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter. The air grew warm, and Amina felt a sense of peace settle over the village. The next morning, when she walked to the market square with Halima, the glowing death dates above the villagers' foreheads were gone. For the first time in years, Amina felt free. Her gift had saved them, but it had also shown her the strength of her own spirit. As she stood in the bustling square, surrounded by the sounds of life and laughter, Amina realized that her blindness was not a limitation. It was her greatest gift. If you love the story, please don't forget to subscribe and share to your friends and family for more interesting African folktales. Thanks for watching.